Hey girls and gals, welcome back to my channel. My name is Taylor and today's video is going to be the life events book tag. Now I will be leaving the original tag video linked down below in the description box, as well as all of the questions in case you want to do this video yourself. If you see this video and want to participate, consider yourself tagged and definitely let me know down below if you did it so I can check out your video. But without further ado, let's get on with the tag and the first question. So the first prompt is Newborn, a book that was recently released that you want to read. So for all intents and purposes of this video, I'm just going to count newly or recently released as of 2021. I'm going to go with one of my most anticipated that's already been released this year and I haven't gotten a chance to pick up yet, and that is going to be A Dowry of Blood. This is a novella by S.T. Gibson, and this is a reimagining of Dracula's Brides. So honestly, the cover and that very small premise really drew me in, but the whole premise of this is that it is written like a love letter from our protagonist, our main character, to her abuser. So it does also deal with some really dark topics as well. So if adult vampires already didn't give that away, it is going to be dealing with some heavy subject matter in here that I have heard is done brilliantly well. And I have also heard not only it has really good sapphic relationships, but a polyamorous relationship as well. This book wasn't on my radar to make it to my January anticipated releases video, but ever since I first heard about it, I cannot stop thinking about the premise, about the stunning cover. I just absolutely cannot wait to pick this one up. It's a queer retelling of Dracula from one of his brides, and Dracula is one of my favorite classics, so I just feel like the gothic atmosphere of this book is going to be next level. Prompt number 2 is Loose Tooth. What is a book series that you had to push through to read? And for this one, I'm going to have to go with the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. The first 3 books I absolutely blew through, and then from the 4th book to the very last book in the series, I would have, it wasn't that I didn't want to finish this series, but they started out very slow, and I'm a very character-driven reader, and usually slow books don't really like put me off too much. I don't know what it was about the series because I did enjoy my time reading it, but from books 4 to I believe 7, I found the first 100 to 200 pages took me a very long time to get through, and then somewhere around that 200 page mark, it was just like a sprint to the finish. So I did really enjoy them. I did really enjoy my process of reading this series. I enjoyed the series as a whole, and I will say Sarah J. Maas really knows how to stick an explosive ending, and I don't know what it was. I would finish a book, be like, wow, that was a really good conclusion, and then just be like put off by the next book in the series just because I knew it was going to start off very slow. I don't know what it was about that series, but definitely that series took some work, and I don't want to say work because reading, of course, for pleasure is never work, but I definitely found myself for most of the books in that series greatly enjoying the second half of the book as opposed to the first half. Prompt number 3, Monster Under the Bed. What is a book that haunts you? And for this one, I'm going to go with Disappearance at Devil's Rock by Paul Tremblay. I don't recommend this book a lot on my channel. If I had to pick a favorite of Paul Tremblay's, I would probably say it is A Head Full of Ghosts, but I would be lying if I said this book is probably the, I don't even know if I want to say scariest, but saddest, and definitely the book that has, one of the books that has impacted me on an emotional level more than any other book I think of at least the past 10 years. At its essence, this is a story about a young tween boy who goes missing, and it's following his friends and the events leading up to him going missing, and it's also following his sister and his mother as well as they're trying to locate him, hopefully trying to find him and bring him home safe and sound. I could be making this up, but correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Paul Tremblay is a high school teacher, either a junior high or high school teacher, and I think in this book it really shows. And again, I don't know if this would be a book that would impact anyone else the same unique way that it impacted me, but at the time that I specifically was reading this book, the boy who disappeared was, I think, pretty much exactly between the ages of, I have 4 younger siblings, and he was like exactly in between the ages of my 2 brothers that I have, and just in particular this character, even down to the way he spoke, really reminded me of just this perfect combination of my brothers, and just ways that he would act and things that he would say, just really, that really hit me deep. And so I think really put me into the story in a way that probably not everyone is going to be inserted into a story like this one. But this isn't, I wouldn't say this is scary so much as sad. And I don't want to give too much away because Paul Tremblay does have really good, solid endings, especially for the horror genre, a genre where I feel it is very hard to stick a perfect ending in a book. But this just really hit me, and I really found myself connecting to the characters on a very deeply personal level. And I just feel like for a lot of horror, that is the key to good horror, is being able to feel yourself in that situation and empathize with situations and just really feel that like real life terror. I'm definitely a person who loves supernatural horror and who loves ghosts and demons and exorcisms and creature horror and everything. Like, I'm not too much into slasher serial killer horror. I do consume a lot of horror. I do read a lot of true crime, listen to true crime podcasts. I'm not generally put off by things, but this book just really hit me hard. So it is definitely a book that haunts me. Prompt number 4, first day of school. A book you were scared to read because it was out of your comfort zone. And for that one, I'm going to go with Crescent City by Sarah J. Maas. I actually have talked about this quite a number of times, but at the beginning of the pandemic, my partner and I were at Target. We were like, okay, we don't know how long this thing is gonna last. Maybe we should stock up on some like entertainment for us just to keep us entertained for however long this is going to last. I wasn't even planning on reading Crescent City, House of Earth and Blood. I had never previously read anything by Sarah J. Maas, and I was like, you know what? This book is very thick, very chunky. I know a ton of people here on BookTube love this author, so why not give it a go? And I am so glad I did. I really enjoyed this one. And it really showed me a whole new subgenre of fantasy. I had never before really read anything that I would classify as fantasy romance, and I'm definitely more interested into checking that out because I never used to say that I was a big fan of romance and that I didn't really like romance in books, but I don't really like contemporary tales as a whole. I'm much more into like supernatural horror, fantasy, sci-fi. I'm really not into contemporary as a genre, so I think taking those romance elements, putting it into a fantasy world, I just never even thought about trying a book like that. So it was very large, it was very much out of my comfort zone. I decided to pick it up on an absolute whim, and it was one of my favorite books of last year, so go figure. Prompt number 5, First Crush, a book that will always have a special place in your heart. For this one, I'm kind of going to go with a series, but the Warrior series, specifically the original 6 books. I know there's a ton of Warrior Cats books out right now, but I got into the series when there weren't any other series other than some of the first one. It was still being published when I got into the series, like the first 6 books, so aging myself a little bit. But I had to pick this book because I really loved this series as a kid. It was one of the series that I read and reread over and over, and this one's just like a little bit of a special place in my heart to me because me and one of my friends from grade school we had like a binder full of loose leaf notebook paper, and we would create clans together. If you haven't read these books before, it's about cats in the wild, and they have like these little clans. There are 4 of them, and they fight over territory and defend their territory, and they're like found family. They're very good books. I think they're like middle grade 2YA. That being said, there was a whole lot of violence in these books. Like, these cats are constantly fighting each other. There's always danger from like predators and other cats and humans taking over their territory. So they are pretty dark at times, but I would say it is like middle grade to young adults. I mean, I think if I were to reread them now, I would still enjoy them, if not purely for the sake of nostalgia. But me and my friend used to write together and create in the world of Warrior Cats, and that led us to going online and finding this wonderful thing called fan fiction. And so this series was in a lot of ways my introduction to not only fan fiction, but just writing in general and writing for a fandom in general, and really just writing for myself for pleasure, and realizing that creating stories was something that I really loved and really wanted to do in some capacity for the rest of my life. So I definitely have to credit this series with that. I have a lot of happy memories, not only reading these books. Like, I used to take them on vacations because I got the paperbacks and they were just pretty easy to bring all 6 in the car ride, and for longer vacations just read them all back to back to back. but then also just the whole experience of writing about them. That was a whole lot of fun. Prompt number 6, first love, the first book that you fell in love with. And this one is one that I definitely don't mention on my channel for pretty apparent reasons, but I would be remiss to say the Harry Potter series really was the series, honestly the first series that I remember my parents reading to me, and then really I feel like I was born in 1995, so a lot of my life events kind of linked up with the books coming out, and then later on the movies coming out. It was a whole lot of fun. Me and my friends would get dressed up for not only the movie premieres but for the book midnight releases. Obviously now looking back at it, these books are pretty dated in some of the very iffy stereotypes and just things in them, as well as bigoted views by the author of this series, but I just would be remiss to not talk about this because I think for me and a lot of people of my generation, it was such a watershed moment. Even for people who didn't read would be reading these books, and I thought that was really cool. And especially just, you know, everyone I feel like banding together and not spoiling the books for each other, everyone getting ready to go to their local Barnes and Noble or library or bookstore, pretty much anywhere at the midnight release of these books. So many of my childhood memories are tied up in these books, reading them with my friends, talking about fan theories with my friends, kind of going online trying to figure out what was going to happen in the next book, right? It was just a truly wild time to be alive and really be a part of that generational sort of experience, and then kind of getting to re-experience the magic over and over again with the movies. It definitely got me and a ton of kids in my generation to become avid readers, so I do really enjoy just the experience and also just the fandom in general. And it is hard to separate the artist from the art, especially with books, if views tend to bleed into the art itself, but I just feel like the fandom just still is such a welcoming place, and it was definitely my first fandom where I felt truly myself and just felt like I was a part of something fantastic and magical and greater than myself. So those are memories I'm always going to keep with me. Prompt number 7, graduating from high school, a book you had mixed feelings about finishing. For that would be The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. I actually read the first, I would say 30 to 40% of this book in like maybe one sitting. I really enjoyed it. And then I have anxiety and I really wanted to finish it, but I said, wait a second, I am never going to experience reading this book for the first time again. And that really just got me worried again. Like, I am not just saying that, I do actually have anxiety, and unfortunately, even though reading is a fun time for me, a lot of the times when I have bad mental health, it kind of influences my reading and whatnot. So I was really wigging out about it. I put it down for a couple of months and then picked it up again and read it more slowly because I just didn't want to rush through a book that I could tell was going to be one of my favorites. And it really was. It was my first book by Samantha Shannon. She is now one of my favorite authors, and I hadn't really read a lot of adult fantasy up until that point. I was really feeling burnt out on just my own writing and just a lot of stuff about life in general, and then it just became one of my favorite books. It really reignited my love for creative writing and wanting to create my own world like that someday. So I definitely didn't want to finish it because it's one of those books where you always see like on TikTok or Twitter, like what is one thing you wish you could experience for the first time again, and that is definitely this book for me. It just was so magical. I loved the experience of it, and I do plan on a reread soon, but just that magical experience of that book was something that I definitely wanted to savor. Prompt number 8, moving out, a book you're both excited and scared to read. And I would have to say for that, The Secret Commonwealth, really any of the trilogy that has come out, the Book of Dust trilogy after the His Dark Materials trilogy by Philip Pullman. His Dark Materials is also one of my favorite series of all times. I absolutely love it. It's a comfort read for me. I have reread it, I think I would say now now at this point, it is the series that I have reread the most. It is very much a modern fantasy classic, so I was more than a little nervous to start this sequel series just because not only do I love his Dark Materials so much, but I also thought the series as a whole didn't really leave me feeling like I wanted more. It ended very perfectly, at least so I thought. And while as readers I feel like when we love a universe or love something so much, we always want more from the world and we never want stories with our favorite characters to end, at the same time I felt like it ended so well. And of course there were other like smaller supplemental stories that were added in, but it did deal with mostly the same characters and they were either little prequels or little character studies. So I was really excited and nervous to pick up The Book of Dust and The Secret Commonwealth. The third one, I have no idea when it's coming out. I will say The Book of Dust I enjoyed. The Secret Commonwealth was a very weird reading experience for me, unfortunately, because our main character in the His Dark Material series, Lyra Belacqua, she is a young girl in the series, and then in this series, in The Secret Commonwealth at least, we follow her as an adult. And this is something that like I've thought about, fans of the series have thought about for so long, like what this precocious, wonderful child would grow up to be like. And it's just this whole theme of this new series, I don't really know if I have a grasp on it yet. I don't not enjoy it. I would say if you're on the fence, especially with the third book not being released or even talked about yet as it coming out anytime soon, I would say if you love the series, maybe don't pick this one up if you're on the fence, because it's not tarnishing my enjoyment of the series, but even though it does deal with a lot of the same characters and the same world, it just feels very different. And I don't know how I feel about it yet. So that was like a series that I was both excited and scared to read, because absolutely I love that world and the magic building system and the demons, and there was a lot that was introduced in the Secret Commonwealth that I think is going to be very hard to wrap up in one final book of this series. So I'm very much nervous and very much anticipating the third book. It doesn't even have a title or release date or anything yet, so we'll see when we get that, but that is just a whole series that I was excited and scared to read at the same time for each book, and I'm sure the third book will be no different. Prompt number 9, Marriage, a book you will love forever and ever. And I noticed I'm a big fantasy reader, so I'm sorry, a lot of these I'm just doing series instead of specific books, but I'm going to have to say the Poppy War series by R.F. Kwong for this one. This series is one of my new favorite series. I read all 3 of the books last year and I love it. I love the characters, I love the plot, I love the magic system, the world building, the themes discussed in here, and I truly honestly believe that thematically this is like a near perfect series. For a lot of my favorite books, I'm definitely not above seeing like where some things maybe aren't perfect, maybe some things that I would have liked to be changed, but thinking on the Poppy War series, I just love it so much and I've had a bit of a distance from it now. I can't explain it. I feel so passionately about this series and about the characters and the things discussed, and it was just so powerful. I definitely feel like this is a series that is going to be a modern classic in about 100 years from now. I feel like it will be a classic just with the things that's discussed. They're genuinely wonderful books, and yeah, I just feel thematically they're perfect. Rin as a main character and her at the start of the first book to the end of the third book, it's just a perfect, wonderful, I don't want to say what type of character she is because I almost feel like that's a spoiler for a lot of the Poppy War, but just exploring that character's development and just it's a wonderful character arc, a wonderful story. It's definitely a series that means a lot to me and one that I will love forever and ever. Definitely one of my favorite book series, and for a good reason. If you are looking for a good high fantasy that packs very much emotional punch with a lot of historical elements, with a lot of discussions about things that are explored through a fantasy lens but can definitely be applied to our Earth's history and our Earth today as well, highly recommend checking it out. Prompt number 10, Retirement, a book that made me feel fulfilled. And for this one, I would have to say On Writing by Stephen King. I just feel like, I think for this one, if you listen to the audiobook, it's just such a wonderful experience if you are a fan of Stephen King. If you're not, definitely don't pick this one up, just because I feel like it's also not just like a book about the craft of writing, which it is, but it's also like an autobiography, as well as he uses a lot of his books as examples for this and how he writes, so it does spoil a lot of his books. So don't go into this one as your first book by King by any means, but this one really made me feel fulfilled. I want to publish fiction one day, and I'm always writing, and I feel like anyone who has ever tried to write creatively, even for fun, it's a strange experience because you love the journey, you love this craft, it's fun, it's also really hard, it's really easy to doubt yourself and be your own worst critic, and I really loved what this book had to say, and just that being paired with Stephen King narrates the audiobook himself, so it really felt like someone that I greatly admire and respect as an author, as a writer. Just listening to, kind of feeling like I was sitting down and talking with him, and him explaining his writing process was just such a wonderful experience, and it really made me feel, by the end of it, I came away from it really feeling like I could publish my work someday, so I did really enjoy that. Prompt number 11, Old Age, a book you will be rereading for the rest of your life, and I did already touch on this on another prompt, but His Dark Materials by Philip Pullman is my comfort series. I love it. It is the series I have reread the most at this point in my life, and I just feel like every time I revisit this series, I find out just something new, or I take some new meaning from it, or certain passages will ring out more true to me based on when I read it. I'll always find some beautiful quote or passage that I just need to hear at that moment when I'm rereading the books, so they're always such a fun experience for me, especially the first book, Northern Lights or The Golden Compass, depending on where you live. It is so wonderful and so magical, like the way so few books, I feel like even sometimes when you reread books that you loved as a kid, you don't have that magical spark, and it's kind of disappointing, but for this series, it's just every single time I start this series, it just takes me on such an emotional roller coaster. There are certain things in the series that happens that hit me emotionally, even when I know they're coming, and I just always feel like I just come out of this series just finding a little new tidbit of information each time, or kind of taking away something different each time. So I would definitely have to say His Dark Materials. I love reading them physically, but last time I reread them, I tried out the audiobooks for the first time, and they are full cast narrated audiobooks, and they're absolutely incredible. So highly recommend you checking them out that way. I did read these books when I was in late grade school, junior high age, and I mean, they are young adult. Our main character, Lyra, is very much in young adult age, but I will freely admit there was a lot about the series that really went over my head the first time I read it. So it's definitely one where one of the main character and most of the other main characters are adults in this series, but our main character, Lyra, is young adult, almost older middle grade age, but I would definitely say young adult and up. Anyone can really get enjoyment out of this. It's just such a magical world and talks about some really deep things and some very somber topics very, very beautifully. Prompt number 12, Next Generation, a book you will pass on to your kids or to your grandkids one day. And of course, like any bookworm, I feel like, you know, I do have some favorite books that of course I will tell my kids about my favorite books. I mentioned a lot of them in this video. Of course, I'm going to let them know that I love His Dark Materials. I really love Priory, The Poppy War, although that one is definitely a very heavy book series that I'll probably encourage them not read until they're, I don't know, older high school or college. But I feel like for the most part, and I think this rings true, I mean, for any book, but I feel like especially with contemporary, when I remember contemporary books that I was reading when I was in 5th, 6th, 7th grade, when I was reading contemporary, I don't think if I were to revisit any of those, I don't know how well a lot of them would hold up in terms of society. So obviously this is a bigger discussion than just one to quickly bring up at the end of a tag video, but I do hesitate saying any specific books that I know a lot of people are like, oh, these are required reading for my future kids. I don't know if I want to do any of that, and I'll definitely have discussions and caveats with my kids about this came out in a different time era. And I think it is really cool to see like representation for everything is getting better and better as time goes on. So I don't really know, especially especially when it comes to middle grade. I just feel like representation and everything is so important. That I'll probably be doing as a parent whenever that is, if that ever happens. I'll probably be doing more research and encouraging them to read books, especially contemporary fiction that have come out recently, because I feel like that better reflects the world that my kids would live in. Again, that being said, I'm gonna hype up my favorite series, gonna talk about how much that I love them, but even in fantasy, you can find things that are definitely products of their time and definitely things that are probably going to be like a little bit antiquated, and I don't want to push anything on my kids. If I had to pick one, I might give them like the Redwall series, or maybe even the His Dark Materials series, at least the Golden Compass, when they're in like 6th or 7th grade, to kind of get a feel for like epic fantasy. But other than that, I think I'll just let them discover books on their own, and I will help them if they want my help, and if they don't want my help, that is totally fine with me. But that is going to be it for this tag. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments down below if you decide to do this tag. I would love to watch your video. Subscribe for more content from me. Stay safe, stay spooky, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye!